You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship with David C. Baker and Blair Enns.
David, we are recording this on July 14th, 2022. My question to you is there a recession coming?
What's at stake?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Is it going to be serious?
No.
So it's a non-serious recession. It's a funny recession.
I have no idea. My instincts tell me, yeah, we've got a recession coming, but I don't think it's going to be like 2008 and 9. I don't know. I'm not an economist, but even if I were, they don't know what they're talking about either.
Why are we doing this topic? What is our topic? What you do if you knew a downturn was coming.
Yeah, in the field. The idea is that firms have been doing pretty darn well recently, yet the signals worldwide they're not mixed. They're pretty clear that things are going to change for the negative, right? Head in that direction. So what does that mean for this industry? Which I have no idea. I don't think it'll be all that serious, but I don't really know. But the point is, what would you do now if you knew that a recession was coming? Even if one isn't coming or if it's not terrible, what would you do now? That's sort of the topic.
So we're not trying to predict the future here.
We're not. No.
We are trying to prepare on the chance that there is a recession coming. I'm going to read something that Tyler Cowen just retweeted from a guy named Jason Furman. I think he might be an economist, but I don't know him. This is July 14th again. If you're not a little confused about the economy, you're not paying attention. 3 of many historical large disconnects in the data. Number 1, jobs growing and GDP contracting. This is the US. Number 2, price growth rising and wage growth falling. We'll talk about that one. And number 3, consumer sentiment plummeting and consumer spending rising. Talk about contradictory signals.
Yeah. And a proxy for how you feel as a consumer/investor, a proxy for that would be, are you selling your holdings in the stock market or are you buying while it's down? Because that tells me what you think long-term about the economy.
Yeah, good point. On the subject, this gentleman's second point of price growth rising and wage growth falling, I remember a conversation a few months ago, so March or April, with a bunch of agency principals on the subject of wage increases.
Right.
We went around the table and everybody shared what they were seeing in wage increases in their firm, what they're delivering. And the consensus was around 25% increase.
Right.
This is less than 6 months ago. There was such a demand for people. Wages were going out of control. And now it's almost like we flipped to the other side of the coin where people are being laid off and there's negative pressure on wage growth.
The places where people were dragging our key team members away, which is usually startups, tech.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're laying people off too. This episode today is one evidence of many pieces of evidence of why I'm not a motivational speaker.
You're more of a demotivational speaker.
Come to me with your excitement and I will fix it.
With your hopes and I will crush them.
The biggest message here is, of course, that none of us really knows. But the other is, don't be telling me that the world can't change really fast. Think about one day Twitter is your client and the next day they're for sale and then the stock loses a third of its value and now they're in court deciding what's going to happen. Or on a Thursday, you think there's a firm that's just too big to fail and then by Monday, Lehman Brothers is completely bankrupt. Or let's say that your entire business is built around TikTok. I've got a client where that's true. And then some U.S. regulator decides that the data privacy concerns are not ameliorated with their new plan. And now they decide that TikTok is an enemy, right? I just don't want to hear from anybody that the world cannot change really, really fast. I don't want you to tell me that, oh, we've got Google and Microsoft and Apple and Twitter. We have all these big clients and we feel really great. The world we live in is a very interconnected world, and something can happen way over here And we're not isolated from the impact of that. Now, I don't want to be alarmist. I just want to say, let's run strong firms that are resilient and can withstand these sort of bumps. That's the big message.
Gotcha.
Are we done now?
Well,
do we need to get into specifics, or are we good?
You have a point here in your outline that M&A activity is still really high. Our recent episode was on the shortcomings of the EBITDA multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
I know from talking to you on a regular basis, you're doing a ton of M&A work, probably more than ever. Is that right?
Right, yeah.
So what's going on there?
It's the M&A work takes a long time to play out. So you decide, oh, I think I might want to do something else, and you can't just flip a switch. It takes a year or two to make that transition. So I think we're still inheriting some of the introspection that occurred over the last 2.5 years. That's part of it. But also, a lot of the bigger firms are taking advantage of sort of the confusion and the noise in the marketplace, and they're growing like crazy, right? And then you have smaller firms that decide they don't want to do this or they do want to do this. So even if we have a downturn, it doesn't mean the M&A market will stop. In fact, it may even accelerate. I think a downturn, I don't know how to say this without it sounding bad. The impact it has on individual people and firms can be really painful, but for the industry as a whole, I'm not sure it's all that bad, because we tend to get fat and happy every few years, and then we need a correction at some point. And I don't know if we're at that point right now, but we're speaking here to the firms that are well-run or want to be well-run, and the ones who aren't listening are the ones that are probably going to fall off a little bit. I don't know. What am I even saying?
Okay. You've got some specific tactics to basically make the firm more resilient. Let me just summarize your advice. We're not sure what's happening. It's a crazy world out there. If you had to make a bet, you would say that we're in for a recession, but not a horrible one like we've seen in previous times. So previous recessions, what do you cite as historical context before we get into your specific tactics of like, how do you make your firm more resilient?
Yeah. Now, some folks listening weren't even running firms back then. But if you think about what happened after 2001, a lot of things, the world sort of came to a stop in this field for a short period of time. And then there was a brief recession. There was not the kind of social angst that there is now. Then 2008 and 2009 was a really bad one. That was the deepest one for our field. And then, of course, you had a deep period of uncertainty back in March of 2020 that lasted for about 6 or 8 weeks, where people wondered, is this sort of a massive correction or the end of my firm for a while? Turned out that looking back, 2020 was a pretty darn good year for almost every firm. 2021 was slightly better than that for most firms, and 2022 is sort of like, we're not sure, it's a little bit better. I'm not an economist, but if we're going to have a recession, which I think we probably will, I don't think it's going to be like 2008, 2009. I don't think it'll be that serious. But you want to prepare for it, right? You don't want to keep all your powder dry and just sort of lock all the doors and stay inside and listen to an AM radio station and see what's happening in the world. You want to keep running your firm, and you want to be responsible about it. Let's just assume that there's a downturn coming. What would you do now if you knew for sure that that was going to happen?
So we're basically wargaming the scenario.
Yeah.
What would happen if we hit a downturn? Okay, so you've got a list of 6 specific tactics. What's the first one?
First one is, don't pay off existing debt earlier. Don't pay it off early. Like, there's seldom any penalty for paying off debt early. And maybe you have an EIDL loan if you're in the U.S., or maybe it's a bank loan. Maybe it's an SBA 7A loan or something you bought the firm.
I have no idea what these are other than bank loan.
This is all U.S. talk. We are the economic center of the world. So get used to these terms. I'm just kidding. No, it's just whatever the debt is, it doesn't matter. If it's on a scheduled payoff, don't accelerate that. You want to hang on to as much cash as you can at the moment. In normal times, if you have the excess money, I think it makes sense to pay off debt early. I don't like debt at all. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But if you do have debt, don't pay it off early. Preserve the cash. Keep your powder dry. That'd be the first piece of advice.
Because A, it's probably cheap. B, it might be hard to get it later if you need it. Gives you a bit of a cushion.
Yeah. In your personal life, you may have a home mortgage and your interest rate might be 2% or something, right? You shouldn't pay that off early. That's cheap debt, and you want to hang on to the cash. And if something does happen and you need to borrow money later, you're not going to be on as strong a financial footing at that point, and it might be harder to get that debt. So if you've already got the debt, don't pay it off early. That's the first point.
I'm laughing. I once hired a new financial advisor, and right before we brought him on board, I paid off all my existing debt. And then he looked at our situation. He said, "Oh my God, what have you done?" I thought I was being responsible. I was like, no, you moron.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't pay off existing debt early. What's the second tactic?
Don't incur any new debt. Now, this may sound very contradictory, and I am decidedly un-American here. In fact, I am constantly checked that people are asking to see my passport to see if I'm actually an American, because I just don't like debt of any kind. And I'm okay with it for appreciating assets like a home or that tractor I just really want to buy. Not an appreciating asset. I see how I slipped that right in there. But I just don't think it's a good idea to incur any debt in a downturn. Particularly, now, if you're going to do it, then here's how you think about it. Like, is this debt for operational stuff that is simply papering over a really significant, screaming, crying need that should be solved in another way? And incurring debt for this operational need, like payroll, is allowing you to put off that really hard decision that you should make. That's the kind of debt that I think it would be really bad anytime. It's particularly bad in a recession, because then once things start to pick up again, you are not one of those firms that has no dirty past and you can just focus entirely on the future. You're one of those firms that can't recover as quickly because now you have to plan for the future, which is getting much better, but you also have to clean up the past. So the first idea was don't pay off existing debt earlier, and you'd think by that I love debt, and I don't. The second one is don't incur any new debt, especially if it's for operational expenses versus, like, here's where debt might make sense. Let's say that you have been considering for a while that there's a new service offering that you really ought to offer. And maybe there's a firm that you could buy that feels like a pretty safe bet. Or maybe instead of buying a firm, you're just going to hire some people and build this out. I could see that making sense in some cases, but firms that are really well run can grow at a pace that's not so frantic that they can fund it from within their own internal cash flow. So generally, first thing, don't pay off the debt that you have. Second thing, don't incur any new debt.
You pointed out at the beginning of this point that this is kind of your personal bias, that you're not a big fan of debt. So that's a personal risk profile issue. Debt is a trade that we make with our present self and our future self. So it's just like trade with any other trading partner, but we're trading with ourselves, and we're trading with ourselves in the future. We might think about that as a bet. We're making a bet on the future. Mm-hmm. And your point is there are so many variables now. There are so many uncertainties and unknowns that it's really hard. If you're making a bet on your future self in this environment, you're making all kinds of assumptions, many of which are almost certainly wrong. You just don't know which ones. It's a high-risk environment to be making a bet on the future in that way, in the form of a debt.
It is, yeah. And while I love the fact that our listeners are generally very smart, very optimistic people, they have a can-do attitude, they are not risk-averse. Having said all that, they are really bad at making projections. I love looking at projections that somebody made and then checking them against historical. We have to do that a lot when we're doing evaluation.
Entrepreneurs are optimists, right?
Yeah, that's a strength and a disadvantage as well. And taking on debt, making a trade with yourself is a time where I think it can be a disadvantage.
All right. Tactic number 3 for building resilience in your firm.
It's not like we're going to fool anybody here, but instead of giving somebody a permanent salary increase, consider giving them a one-time bonus instead. That way, this increased overhead is not built in permanently and forever into your people structure, how you pay them and all that. It's not like they're not going to figure that out. I'm not trying to fool people. I'm just saying that there are times when somebody needs more money because they really deserve it. They've done great work. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should increase your monthly outlay. You can't take money away from people at least not permanently. You just have to let people go. And so these are one-time decisions, right? You're shooting down a fast-moving creek, and it's a whole lot easier to go down than it is to come back up. Just be really careful about permanent salary increases. I don't think there's the kind of pressure there was on the people side as there was even just 2-3 months ago, like you mentioned earlier in this episode. So maybe that's a little bit less of an issue. Now, related to this would be using contractors wherever you can, right? Now, sometimes contractors are more expensive, not always. Some contractors simply just don't want a boss, and they pay for that. They don't get your benefits and all of that. They don't get your paid vacation, but they like the fact that it feels more independent to them. It's not even more expensive to use folks like that. This would be the time to do that. And if you're going to use contractors to keep your variable costs higher and your fixed costs low, then this would be the time to do that. So another part of this too.
All right, bonuses instead of permanent salary increases. I think most of your team members would appreciate the conversation where you say, hey, you deserve some more money. I'm going to give it to you in the form of a one-time bonus because there's just so much uncertainty out there. I think people would appreciate that conversation.
You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship. Your hosts are David C. Baker, author, speaker, and advisor to owners of expert firms, and Blair Enns of Win Without Pitching, the sales training and coaching program for creative entrepreneurs. For more information, go to twobobs.com. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling a friend and rating us on iTunes. Thank you. Now back to David and Blair.
What's fourth on your list?
Client terms. This one, you might have some important stuff to add here too. You're going to get a dispute from a client because they don't like the work is one thing, but some of those disputes about them not liking the work are really just masking the fact that they don't have the money. There's been some downturn. So whatever your terms are, whether it's a third at the beginning or half at the beginning or whatever they are, then just be really careful with that. Don't get too far ahead of your skis so that you're doing work that's not paid for. And this gets difficult because in a downturn, you tend to not clamp down quite as hard because you're even more afraid of losing a client than normal. So it's a little bit counterintuitive to do this, but it's pretty important that you follow your instincts here. And on top of that, just really watch the whole AR thing and don't be afraid to pause work for a client that is too late in paying you and so on. Be careful about agreeing to terms where they pay you in 120 days or 90 days even. So just client terms, be really careful about that. The idea is you don't want to have to walk away from a whole bunch of unpaid work or borrow money because of a cash flow challenge where you've got the profitability, but it's wrapped up on your balance sheet and not theirs, and they still owe you money. So the whole client terms thing, I think, is pretty important too.
I think that idea of pausing work where you need to, where a client is behind, hasn't paid you, that is a lever that is not pulled often enough.
Yeah.
I think it's a very good idea. Terms cut both ways. Sometimes you have a client who's got an affordability issue and they might ask for a lower price and you come back with more favorable to them payment terms.
Right.
Your point is don't get taken advantage by your client. Nobody should work on 120-day terms or 90-day terms. Even 60 days is onerous, I think. But I think there's a line between 60 and 61. At 61 would be never. And 60 might be for good clients at certain times. So they cut both ways. I like your advice of use your intuition on it.
Yeah. The fifth one is facility, which is less important now than it ever has been.
Do people have facilities?
Yeah, that's what I mean. They've just abandoned them, right? But to whatever extent that's not true, if you think of your biggest expenses, it's obviously people. And then your next biggest expense that's not related to people would be a facility if you have one. That's often tying up 6% of your fee base all in. If we think about whatever the monthly payment is and security and cleaning and upkeep and insurance and taxes and all of that. So if you're trapped in a really expensive facility, usually the way you do that is you just look for some forbearance because your landlord doesn't want to lose you. After all, it's a recession. It's going to be hard to sign anybody up for your space. If you file bankruptcy, they're not going to get anything. And they have a pretty big incentive to give you 3 or 6 or 12 months worth of forbearance where you don't pay rent at all. Sometimes that gets added to the end. Sometimes it gets forgiven completely. So the facility, if you have one, would be the next place to attack. The other way to think about this is if you're right at the edge of signing some long-term lease, God forbid, I can't imagine people are doing that right now, especially if it's a really expensive one. Just be really careful about that given where we are right now.
Right. All right. We're talking about specific tactics to make your firm more financially resilient. Don't pay off existing debt earlier. Don't incur any new debt. Give out bonuses instead of permanent salary increases. Pay attention to client terms. Address any facility issues. Maybe seek a pause or forbearance. Certainly don't sign any long-term leases now. That's 5 of our list of 6. The 6th one is lead generation.
There are more firms that are really well positioned than ever before. That's really great news. I would say, too, that there are probably more firms as a percentage doing great lead gen for themselves than ever before. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's great news as well. But there are still a whole bunch of firms, my guess is more than half, who just are not disciplined about it. It's still too accidental. They don't have a switch they can flip to sort of turn on or to speed up the wheel. They need a fire that's burning already, and then they can just add a little gasoline to it, or let's say kerosene, in case anybody takes me literally. And that's just not happening like it should. The main point I want to make is that when you start to spin up your lead gen wheel, it takes a long time. I think it takes at least 6 months, sometimes 9 or 12 months before you start seeing results. And so that needs to be started up now and not when you start panicking. If you start it up now, then you've already gained all of that advantage time-wise. The other thing that happens too is if you build up your lead gen muscle now or your flywheel now, you're not as likely to move how you would describe moving from the expert to the vendor position because you're not desperate yet. You're more likely to come across as a thoughtful expert that's not desperate for work. So there's never a better time to start up your lead gen. And the best time to do it is when you don't quite need it yet, and then always have that running in the background. This is maybe the most important thing for people, is to just pretend that life is not lazy and easy and that they keep getting work over the transom in mysterious ways. Are you doing something that requires discipline where you have a point of view built on top of a tight, narrow positioning where you are reaching prospects regularly? And if you aren't, now's the time to think about that.
This was a piece of advice we gave to folks right at the top of the recession. I forget the name of the episode, but we'll post it in the show notes. And one of the pieces of advice was, if it's a downturn, it was economic gridlock at the time, like just start on all that marketing stuff, all the lead gen activity, writing, creating content that you've been meaning to do. You now have the time, do it now. I went on Twitter the other day and posed the question, knowing what you know about the pandemic now, 2+ some years later, if you could go back to the beginning, what would you do differently in your business or your life? And I was expecting, would you buy more or less toilet paper? But what a couple of people said is, I really should have done the lead gen stuff. Really should have created that content.
Yeah.
And here we go again. If you didn't do it then,
I know.
Are you going to do it now? This is an interesting topic because that's a certain type of work to create content, right?
Yeah.
And if you're busy running your firm, for some people, it's like, there just isn't time to do this. Well, maybe do it now because we don't know how long this downturn is going to last. But others, on the other hand, they always find the time to do this. It either comes easy to them or they're in the groove. They've established the habit. You publish weekly no matter what. Right?
Except for 3 weeks this year. Yeah. And it's very obvious to me where I've missed those 3 weeks. But yeah, I think maybe the difference is, do you view lead gen as another project on your list that has to be done? There's sort of drudgery related to it. Or do you view lead gen as a bubbling spring that you can't hold down, right? And if it's just a chore to you, then it's something you can keep putting off. But if it's like that bubbling spring, you can't put it off. It's almost like an addiction where you just have to satisfy that urge because you have a point of view. You love interacting with your audience. And I want people to be more excited about the fact that they have a pretty tight differentiation and what they do matters to a lot of people in the market.
Yeah. All right. You've given us 6 specific tactics to make your firm more financially resilient in the event that we do go into a recession. Do you have any other parting advice for the listener?
Yeah, just one last thing, and that's to put something in writing. And sort of with a smile, I call this, there's 2 plans you should put in writing. The first one is an shoot plan. That's the one that's like, oh, there's a minor correction. We should probably hold off on expanding here. We should do this. We should do that. None of them really, really painful, but they need to be fairly quick corrections that make sense. That's the shoot plan. And then there's the oh shit plan. And that's the one where you lose your 60% client and the stock market melts down and whatever is happening. And it's like, wow, if I don't react really severely right now, then we're screwed. I am in survival mode here. So you put both of these plans in writing. It could be just 1 page. Maybe nobody else sees it. You want to password this probably. And then you just pull it up on your computer. And it's a lot easier to modify the shoot or the shit plan rather than come up with one in the panic of the moment. So that's the last thing I would say just to help you think through this stuff. So ignore everything I've said today, especially on the projections. Get your lead gen plan up and running and put an shoot and an shit plan together. Talk about academic advice I'm giving today. It's just so powerful.
In case of emergency, break glass. Or I guess it's really about do these things now before there's an emergency.
Yeah. Buy the fire extinguisher on Amazon before the fire starts.
Yeah. I had a couple of responses to my question on Twitter about what would you do differently. A couple of people said, I would have laid off staff more immediately. And that was a piece of advice that I know you gave.
Yeah.
And you like this line, don't cut people's legs off 1 inch at a time. If you're going to make cuts, like make the cuts, make the decision. I talked to a firm owner the other day who had lost 2 medium-sized clients, and then his largest client, 35% of billings, just like ceased spending and laid off thousands of people globally.
Oh, man.
So he cut his firm in half. He cut his headcount in half.
Right.
When I was talking to him, he said, I am aggressively downsizing my firm right now. He expects to rebound. He thinks the client will start spending again, but he just, laid off half his staff.
Yeah, and it's very tough.
It seems so ruthless to the novice business owner, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
But once you've been through this once before and you have this realization, should have laid people off earlier, gets easier the next time.
Yeah. You didn't get any feedback on that Twitter thread that said, I should have waited longer.
Right.
I should have waited longer. Everybody says, no, I did it at the right time or I should have done it earlier. So if it happens, that's probably the first challenge you'll have to face.
Well, David, here's to a fruitful and prosperous remainder of 2022 and a strong 2023. And let's hope your predictions never come to pass. And it's a chicken in every pot and a blah, 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 and every blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and stay tuned for more exciting news from Two Bobs.
You're almost reluctantly doing this episode. He's doing it under duress, people. I made him do this. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Blair.
Thank you for listening to Two Bobs with David C. Baker and Blair Entz. Subscribe and learn more at twobobs.com. That's the number 2, BOBS.com.